Hello and welcome. I'm Henry, and I'm so glad you've joined me for this quiet moment tonight. Tonight I'll be sharing the story of King Midas and his golden touch, an old Greek tale about desire, regret, and the quiet wisdom that sometimes follows. It's a story that reminds us how easily our deepest wishes can lead us somewhere unexpected. Whether it's familiar or brand new to you, let it unfold gently, like a soft echo from long ago. If these stories speak to you, consider subscribing to help the channel grow and continue, only if it truly feels right to you. Either way, I'm thankful you're here. And I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from, so please share in the comments below. Now, as you listen, let your body find stillness. Maybe you're lying down or simply resting in a quiet space. Wherever you are, allow the sounds around you to fade. Let the edges of your day begin to soften. There's nothing you need to hold on to right now. Just let the story carry you, like a breeze through the trees, into a calmer place. Now let us begin our journey to ancient Greece, where gods walked among mortals, and where a king's greatest wish became his greatest lesson. Let's start our story. Long, long ago, in the sun-drenched hills of ancient Phrygia, a land that existed where Turkey stands today, there lived a king named Midas. Picture, if you will, a palace built of white marble that gleamed like pearls in the Mediterranean sunlight. Gardens surrounded this palace, filled with roses whose fragrance drifted on warm breezes, and olive trees that had stood for generations, their silver-green leaves whispering ancient secrets. King Midas was not a cruel ruler, nor was he particularly wise. He was, in many ways, like any of us, a person with hopes and fears, dreams and disappointments. But Midas had one quality that defined him above all others. He loved gold more than anything else in the world, not for the power it brought, not for the comfort it could provide, but for its simple, gleaming beauty. He would spend hours in his treasury, running his fingers through coins, watching the way sunlight caught the surface of golden cups and plates, marveling at the warm, eternal glow of this precious metal. His palace walls were lined with golden ornaments. His tables were set with golden dishes. Even his garden paths were edged with thin strips of gold that caught the morning light. Visitors from distant lands would gasp at the opulence, but for Midas it was never quite enough. There was always room for more gold, always another surface that could shine with that perfect honeyed gleam. Now, in those ancient times, the boundary between the world of mortals and the realm of the gods was much thinner than it is today. Gods and goddesses would sometimes walk among humans, testing their character, observing their choices, and occasionally rewarding acts of kindness or wisdom. One morning, as the dew still sparkled on the rose petals in Midas's garden, something unusual happened. The king's servants came rushing to him with news that they had found an old man sleeping peacefully among the flowers. This was no ordinary old man. His hair was wild and crowned with ivy. His clothes were simple but somehow regal, and despite having clearly spent the night outdoors, he radiated a sense of joy and contentment that seemed to warm the very air around him. The servants, not recognizing who this might be, were prepared to send the stranger away. But Midas, looking into the old man's twinkling eyes, felt something stir in his heart, a recognition of something divine, something special, Perhaps it was intuition, or perhaps it was simple human kindness. But the king ordered that the old man be treated as an honored guest. For 10 days and 10 nights, this mysterious visitor stayed in Midas's palace. He was given the finest foods, the softest beds, and was treated with the utmost respect and care. The old man seemed to delight in everything: the taste of honey cakes, the sound of lyres playing in the evening, the sight of stars reflected in the palace fountains. His laughter was infectious, and his stories of distant lands and magical adventures filled the palace with wonder. What Midas didn't know was that his guest was Silenus, the beloved companion and teacher of Dionysus, the god of wine, celebration, and the joyful aspects of life. Silenus had wandered away from the god's procession and had become lost. But rather than being distressed, he had simply decided to enjoy this unexpected adventure. On the 10th day, as the morning sun painted the palace walls in shades of gold and rose, Dionysus himself appeared at the palace gates. He was magnificent to behold, tall and graceful, with dark hair crowned with grapevines, and eyes that seemed to hold all the warmth of summer afternoons and all the merriment of harvest festivals. Dionysus thanked King Midas for caring so tenderly for his dear friend Silenus, explaining that such kindness had not gone unnoticed. In return for this generosity, the god offered to grant Midas one wish, anything his heart desired. Midas felt his pulse quicken. Here was a god, an actual god, standing before him, offering to fulfill his deepest desire. His mind raced with possibilities, but one thought shone brighter than all the others, more attractive than the sun itself. With trembling excitement, he expressed his greatest wish, that everything he touched would turn to gold. Dionysus paused, and for just a moment, something that might have been concern flickered across his divine features. He had seen many wishes granted over the centuries, and he had learned that mortals often desired things that would ultimately bring them sorrow rather than joy. But a promise made by a god must be kept. The god gently asked if Midas was certain this was what he wanted, warning him to think carefully, for once granted, this gift could not be easily undone. But Midas was beyond careful thinking. His imagination was already dancing with visions of unlimited wealth, of a world transformed by his golden touch. He eagerly confirmed that this was exactly what he wanted. Dionysus nodded slowly and granted the wish. From that moment forward, everything Midas touched with his hands would turn to pure gold. With these words, the god raised his hand, and a warm, tingling sensation flowed through Midas from the top of his head to the tips of his fingers. The god reminded him softly that true wealth cannot always be measured in gold, and with that, the god and Silenus faded away like morning mist, leaving Midas alone in his garden, staring at his hands with wonder and anticipation. For a moment, the king simply stood there, hardly daring to breathe. Had it really happened? Was he truly blessed with the golden touch? Slowly, hesitantly, he reached out toward a rose bush. The moment his fingertip brushed against a red rose, the transformation began. Like ripples spreading across the surface of a pond, gold flowed from his touch. The rose's petals hardened into perfect golden leaves. Its stem became a rod of precious metal. Even the thorns gleamed like tiny golden daggers. Midas gasped with delight. He touched another flower, then another. Each one became a perfect golden sculpture, beautiful beyond imagination. He touched the marble bench where he had been sitting, and it transformed into a seat fit for the gods themselves. A fountain, a tree, the stone pathway beneath his feet, everything he touched became gold. Racing back to his palace, Midas began touching everything in sight. Tables, chairs, curtains, pottery, all became gleaming treasures. His servants watched in amazement as their king transformed the very walls around them. Word spread quickly through the palace, and soon everyone was marveling at this incredible gift. But as the afternoon wore on, Midas began to notice some small inconveniences. When he reached for a scroll to read, it became a golden tablet, unreadable and heavy. When he tried to pick up his favorite lyre to play a soothing melody, it transformed into a golden sculpture, silent and cold. These were minor annoyances, he told himself. The beauty and wealth more than made up for such small troubles. As evening approached, Midas realized he was growing hungry. He called for his servants to bring him dinner, and they arrived with platters of his favorite foods: fresh bread, olives, grapes, honey, and wine. Midas settled at his golden table, surrounded by golden dishes, feeling like the richest man who had ever lived. He reached for a piece of bread, and the moment it touched his fingers, it became a golden loaf. Beautiful, but impossible to eat. He tried an olive, and it too became a small golden orb. The grapes turned to golden clusters the instant he touched them. Even the wine in his golden cup became molten gold the moment it touched his lips. For the first time since receiving his gift, Midas felt a flutter of worry in his chest. But surely, he thought, he could find a way around this small problem. Perhaps he could use tools to eat or ask servants to feed him. The inconvenience seemed small compared to the incredible wealth surrounding him. As the sun set and the palace grew quiet, Midas walked through his transformed home, admiring the way torchlight danced off every golden surface. Everything was more beautiful than he had ever imagined possible. He was, without doubt, the richest man in the world. It was then that he heard familiar footsteps in the corridor outside his chamber. Light, quick steps that he would recognize anywhere. His daughter, Zoe, was coming to wish him good night, as she did every evening. Zoe was the light of Midas's life, a young woman with her mother's gentle spirit and eyes that sparkled with intelligence and kindness. She had her father's curiosity about the world, but unlike Midas, she found wonder in simple things: the song of birds at dawn, the way shadows danced on walls, the stories shared between friends. Zoe entered his chamber, having heard the amazing news from the servants about her father being blessed by a god, about everything he touched becoming gold. She wanted to know if the incredible rumors were true. Midas turned to face his beloved daughter, his heart swelling with pride and excitement. He spread his arms wide, telling her the stories were more wonderful than she could imagine. Everything she could see around her had been transformed, making them the wealthiest family that had ever existed. But as Zoe stepped into the room, her face showed not excitement, but concern. She looked around at the golden furniture, the golden walls, the golden statues that had once been living plants. She asked about his scrolls, his books of poetry, his musical instruments. She wondered about the roses he loved to tend, the fountain where the birds came to drink. Midas gestured proudly, explaining that they were all there, more beautiful than ever, and now they would never fade, never break, never die. Zoe reached out to touch what had once been her father's favorite lyre, now a golden sculpture. She observed quietly that if these things never changed, they weren't really alive anymore. Her words struck something deep in Midas's heart, but he pushed the feeling away. He insisted that she didn't understand yet, that this was a blessing beyond measure. In his excitement and love, he moved toward her with arms outstretched, wanting to embrace her and tell her all about his wonderful gift. Zoe tried to warn him to wait, but it was too late. In his excitement and love, Midas wrapped his arms around his daughter in the warm embrace they had shared every night for years. But the moment his hands touched her, the terrible magic began to work. Zoe's eyes widened in surprise, then confusion, then understanding. The color drained from her face as gold began to spread from where her father's hands touched her shoulders. Like frost forming on a window, the transformation crept across her skin, down her arms, up her neck. She whispered his name, her voice filled with gentle understanding, even as the change overtook her. And then she was silent, forever silent, transformed into the most beautiful golden statue that had ever existed. Her face still held that expression of gentle understanding. Her eyes still seemed to sparkle with love for her father. But she was no longer the warm, living daughter who had filled his life with joy. Midas stepped back, his hands shaking, his heart shattering like glass. He called her name in a whisper, then louder with desperate hope. He reached toward her golden face, then stopped himself just in time. He could never touch her again. He could never embrace her, never feel her hand in his, never brush away her tears or receive her gentle kisses on his cheek. The golden palace, which had seemed so magnificent just moments before, now felt like a tomb. All the wealth in the world meant nothing compared to the sound of his daughter's laughter, the warmth of her smile, the simple joy of her presence. Midas sank to his knees before the golden statue of Zoe, tears streaming down his face. He cried out in anguish, asking himself what he had done, what terrible mistake he had made. For the first time since receiving his gift, Midas truly understood what Dionysus had tried to warn him about. Gold was beautiful, yes, but it was cold and lifeless. It could not love him back, could not speak to him, could not bring him the true happiness that came from connection, from life, from love. He spent that night sitting beside his daughter's statue, talking to her as if she could still hear him, telling her how sorry he was, how much he loved her, how he would give anything, everything, to have her back. The golden walls that had seemed so magnificent now felt like prison bars, separating him from everything he truly cared about. As dawn broke over the palace, painting the golden surfaces with rosy light, Midas made his decision. He could not live like this. The gift he had thought would bring him happiness had instead brought him the deepest sorrow he could imagine. He walked out to the same garden where he had first met Silenus, where Dionysus had granted his foolish wish. Standing among the golden flowers and golden trees, he raised his face to the sky and called out with all the strength left in his broken heart. He begged the great Dionysus, god of joy and celebration, to hear him, admitting that he had been wrong, so terribly wrong. He pleaded for mercy, asking that the gift be taken back. He no longer wanted the golden touch. He wanted his daughter back. He wanted his life back. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, like music carried on the morning breeze, Dionysus's voice filled the air. The god asked if Midas truly understood what he was asking, and whether he was willing to give up all this wealth, all this gold, to return to the simple life he had before. Midas cried out without hesitation that yes, he would give up every piece of gold in the world to hold his daughter again, to hear her laugh, to share a simple meal with her. Dionysus then asked if Midas had learned that the most precious things in life cannot be bought or created through magic, but must be cherished and protected through love and wisdom. Midas replied with deep sincerity that he had learned this painful lesson. He had discovered that he'd had everything he needed before he ever made his wish. He had been the richest man in the world, and he hadn't even known it. Dionysus appeared before him then, not in the grand, intimidating form of the previous day, but as a figure of compassion and understanding. The god acknowledged that because Midas had learned this lesson with such pain and sincerity, he would undo what was done. But first, Midas must perform one task. Midas immediately declared his willingness to do anything required. Dionysus explained that Midas must travel to the river Pactolus, which flowed near his kingdom. He would need to wade into its waters and immerse himself completely. The river would wash away his golden touch, and its magic would be dispersed into the water itself. From that day forward, the sands of the Pactolus would contain gold, but Midas would be free of the curse. Midas didn't wait another moment. He ran from his palace, through the golden gardens, down the hillside toward the river Pactolus. He had walked beside this river many times before, had listened to its gentle murmur as it wound through the countryside, but he had never appreciated its simple beauty as much as he did now. The water was cool and clear, flowing over smooth stones and between grassy banks where wildflowers grew. Midas waded in without hesitation, not caring that his royal robes were getting wet and muddy. He dove beneath the surface, feeling the river's gentle current flow over him, through his hair, across his skin, and as he emerged gasping and dripping, he felt the change immediately. The strange tingling sensation that had filled his hands since receiving the gift was gone. He was just Midas again, not a magical king, not the richest man in the world, just a father who wanted his daughter back. He ran back to the palace faster than he had ever run in his life, his wet clothes clinging to him, his heart pounding with hope and fear. Would it work, he wondered. Would Dionysus keep his promise? Racing through the palace corridors, he burst into his chamber where the golden statue of Zoe still stood, beautiful and heartbreaking in the morning light. For a moment, Midas hesitated, afraid to hope too much. Then slowly, gently, he reached out and touched his daughter's golden cheek. The transformation was like watching the sun rise. Color flowed back into Zoe's face. Warmth returned to her skin, and suddenly she was taking a breath, blinking, looking around in confusion. She asked what had happened, remembering her father embracing her, and then everything going strange. Midas pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, feeling the warmth of her living body, the rhythm of her breathing, the beating of her heart. He whispered that she was alive, she was safe, she was here, tears of joy streaming down his face. As they held each other, Midas looked around his chamber and saw that everything else was changing too. The golden walls were returning to their original marble. The golden furniture was becoming wood and bronze again. The golden decorations were transforming back into the simple but comfortable belongings he had known before. His treasury, when he checked it later, still held the gold he had accumulated through years of trade and wise rule, but it no longer seemed like the most important thing in his life. Instead, he found himself treasuring the things he had overlooked before: the sound of birds singing in his garden, the taste of fresh bread and honey, the feeling of soil between his fingers as he tended his roses. From that day forward, King Midas ruled his kingdom with new wisdom. He still appreciated beauty and craftsmanship, but he understood now that the most precious things in life were not made of gold. He cherished every conversation with his daughter, every sunset they watched together, every simple meal they shared. He became known not for his wealth, but for his generosity and kindness. He would often tell visitors the story of his golden touch, warning them that true happiness came not from accumulating treasures, but from treasuring what they already had. And sometimes on quiet evenings when the stars were bright and the palace was peaceful, Midas would walk down to the river Pactolus, where golden flakes still glittered in the sand, a reminder of his lesson learned. He would think about how close he had come to losing everything that mattered, and he would whisper a prayer of gratitude for the wisdom that had come from his folly. The river would murmur its gentle song, the stars would shine their ancient light, and Midas would return to his palace where his daughter waited, where warmth and love and simple human joy were worth more than all the gold in the world. And as the years passed, whenever travelers would visit King Midas seeking advice about finding happiness, he would smile and share his hard-won wisdom. He would tell them to look around themselves, to really see what was already there. The greatest treasures, he would explain, were often hiding in plain sight, waiting for people to have the wisdom to recognize their value. A loving family, a peaceful moment, the taste of fresh water when thirsty, the warmth of sunlight on one's face. These things were worth more than any treasure chest ever could be. And so our story comes to its close, like the gentle dimming of twilight into peaceful night. King Midas learned that the richest life is not one filled with gold, but one filled with love, gratitude, and the wisdom to appreciate the simple gifts that surround us every day. As you rest here now, feeling the comfort of your bed, the softness of your pillow, the gentle rhythm of your own breathing, perhaps you can feel an echo of Midas's final wisdom. You're surrounded by treasures too, the safety of your home, the promise of tomorrow's possibilities, the quiet peace of this moment. Let your body sink deeper into relaxation now. Let your breathing slow and deepen naturally. Feel how your chest rises and falls like gentle waves on a calm shore. Your arms can rest heavily at your sides. Your legs can become completely still and peaceful. The story of Midas reminds us that we often have everything we need for happiness right here, right now. As you drift towards sleep, carry with you the image of that gentle river, the Pactolus, flowing peacefully through the countryside, its waters clear and clean, washing away all worries and carrying them safely away. You are exactly where you need to be, exactly as you are, in this moment of perfect rest. Let the ancient wisdom of this tale settle gently in your heart, like snow falling on quiet ground. Tomorrow will bring its own gifts and challenges, but for now, there is only this peaceful moment, this gentle rest, this soft journey into sleep. May your dreams be filled with the true treasures of life, love, peace, understanding, and the deep contentment that comes from knowing you are exactly where you belong. Sleep well.